Welcome to Writer's Digest Presents. Hosted by the editors of Writer's Digest, this monthly podcast features conversations with writing and publishing experts whose insights will help ignite your creative vision, hone your skills, build your platform, and get your work out into the world.
Hello everyone, I am Michael Woodson, and welcome to Writer's Digest Presents. You know, we are mere days away from the first official day of fall, and this time of year always makes me think of the start of the school year, and with that, I think of all of the books I loved reading growing up. Books like Tuck Everlasting, Shiloh, James the Giant Peach, and basically everything ever written by Margaret Peterson Haddix. Writing for young people, especially middle graders, is just as challenging and as rewarding as writing for adults, and keeping young readers engaged plays an important role in building lifelong readers from the start. Well, today, I am chatting with author Alyssa Colman. Alyssa is a middle grade author whose newest book, Where Only Storms Grow, is currently available, and it introduces readers to a history they maybe have never heard of, but connects it to a present that they will totally understand. It's an incredible book. I loved talking with Alyssa. We talked about writing for young readers, the books we loved growing up, advice for writers interested in writing for this age demographic, and so much more. So, without further ado, Writer's Digest presents Alyssa Colman. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me today. If you don't mind, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today, Michael. I'm Alyssa Colman, Colman with no E. I write middle grade fiction for kids and the grown-ups that love them.
Yes.
I say it's heartwarming with a classic feel is how I describe my books.
Totally.
I have 3 books out in the world, probably by the time this airs. The first is The Gilded Girl, which is a retelling of a little princess set in a gilded age with magic. The Tarnished Garden, which is a retelling of The Secret Garden, set in the same world that follows a minor character from the first book. And my new book that just came out in August is Where Only Storms Grow. And that is not a retelling of anything. It is a story about twins, Hal and Joanna, growing up in the Dust Bowl, trying to keep their family together and alive.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Oh, I just got chills actually thinking about it. And that your first 2 books, those retellings are my husband's 2 favorite movies of all time.
Oh,
and
how fun.
I know. So I'll have to tell him to read those. I forgot totally about, like, when you look at them, it's like, of course, yes, they're retellings, but I forgot, like, he would be very interested in them.
Yeah, he likes books with magic. You will
huge.
definitely,
Yeah.
You will feel the influence of those movies, and
Yes.
my love for Newsies is also quite.
Oh my
apparent
gosh!
in them.
Are you my husband? He is obsessed with Newsies. He is obsessed with Newsies.
Oh, then he will love them because there is a strong Newsies reference in both
perfect.
books.
Perfect. Yeah. So as you mentioned, like, it's August. We're in the midst of back to school season. Most, I'd say, young people are back to school now, and you write for a young audience. I guess, as you said, the target audience is young, maybe 8 to 12, but you are so right. Like, adults can and should read them, and they will get so much out of them, particularly because they are, by and large, historical fiction. And I think I've been thinking a lot about the books I read around that age and how they made such a massive impression on me, and what I would grow up to love reading, and a little bit what I would like to write. And of course, like, at the time, I don't think I knew they were having such an impression on me, other than that I loved them a lot. But I'm wondering, what were the books you devoured and adored at that age?
I knew you were going to ask this, so I made a list.
Good.
Because otherwise, every book you loved flies right out of your head.
Totally, yes.
I loved Redwall by Brian
yes.
Jakes. Yes. I like to say I got my start in writing because I used to write Redwall fan fiction for myself.
We've all done something like that, yes.
And I used to write fan letters to Anne Rinaldi, who wrote a lot of historical fiction set during the American Revolution. When I found out that her son did reenacting and would do Washington crossing the Delaware every year on Christmas Day, I used to beg my parents to spend Christmas morning there in the hopes of running into her.
Of course.
Yeah, like, that's the kind of reader I was.
Yeah.
Like, when I got into something, I felt deeply.
Yes.
Yeah. No, my favorite book of all time is a book called Quest for a Maid by
Okay.
an author named, she's a Scottish author named Frances
Mm,
Mary Hendry.
mm.
And I have never met another living soul who has read this book.
Really?
Um, it is absolutely, like, I just love it so much. It's about two sisters, one who is a witch growing up. Um, and yeah, I love this book so much. And
Wow.
I like to tell kids, it goes to show that your favorite book doesn't have to be the most popular
Oh,
book.
completely.
That has been my favorite book since I was 12, and
Oh, I
I've
love
reread it
that.
so many times since then, and it still holds up. And it doesn't matter that nobody else has ever read it.
Totally.
I can still love it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, now I'm going to read it. That's a good point. And again, I mean, of course, the title is going to completely. I always forget the title of these books when they're in another room. I wish I'd grabbed them, but I also had these books that I loved growing up. They were like, oh gosh, they were. It was like a scout group, and it was a series of books about this like um, boys and girls scout group, and I loved them, and I my whole life have never known anyone else who's ever read them, and I
Yeah.
was in a former life when I was working at a children's publisher, my coworker, I told her about them, and for the holidays one year, she or COVID year, she like found all of them and sent them to me for like a present, and it was like so touching because I was like, no one's ever even heard of these, and you figured out what I was trying to say. And you're right, like
I'm
in getting
telling.
them again, I was like, wow, these were really, and I had no one to talk to about them, but I loved them so much. But
Yeah.
like in thinking about that too, like I was also trying to think of what my answers would have been, and for me, I think like it totally depends on where I was like in age. My answer
Yes.
changes, like elementary school, I would say my two favorite books were Tuck Everlasting and James and the Giant Peach. And
Oh,
then in middle
so good.
school, it was basically every single Margaret Peterson Haddix book. I just devoured her books.
Yes, she's amazing.
Yes, I still love her books. Um, and then in high school, I really loved A Separate Piece.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I reread
and
that one recently. It's I
it
loved it
holds
even
up.
more as an adult than
Me
I did
too.
as a kid. Yeah.
Yes, that one and controversial Catcher in the Rye. Like I thought it was fine in high
Mm-hmm.
school, and then I had to read it again in college for like a psychology and literature class, and I had a completely different experience reading it and really loved it. I know people
Yeah.
have big feelings about that book, but I also thought that I reread that one. I was like, this is really quite spectacular. Um, but I'm thinking like I've been trying to think of what held my attention, and like let's talk. Like I do think Tuck Everlasting is top 5 favorite books for me of all time, and a big thing for me with that one was like just how it was the first time that like the detail of the world was so rich in reading for
Mm-hmm.
me, and I think the opening paragraph of Tuck Everlasting is still one of the best in literature, and
Mm-hmm.
I also think it was one of the first books that really challenged me because the ending is really quite sad and bittersweet, and I
Oh
do remember
yeah.
it kind of breaking my heart. And I'm just wondering for you, like for those books that you've mentioned, what was it that held your attention about them?
You know, I think I loved the immersiveness of the world,
Mm-hmm.
first of all. I think that's part of why I liked historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I liked knowing that this was possible,
Mm-hmm.
but also at the same time, I felt like I had a safe distance to
Mm-hmm.
explore all these big feelings and thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was part of it. But really, when it comes down to those lasting books, you don't
Mm-hmm.
remember the words. You may not even remember the
Totally.
character's name, but you're going to remember how they made you feel.
Yeah.
And I think it's that feeling that these books evoke in us that is what makes them so
Okay.
important to young readers.
See, that's a great segue into my question. It's because you're right. Like it does come down to that feeling you get when you read something that you like really connect with. And I'm just as a writer in your process, is that something you're thinking about in the writing process, or is that something that feels kind of like it's kind of out of your control and you hope happens?
Oh, I think I absolutely am thinking about it
Yeah.
as I'm writing,
Yeah.
because if I am bored while I'm writing, I know my
Totally.
readers are going to be bored.
Yeah.
If I feel like maybe I'm putting a little too much detail or a little too much historical information in, my
Mm.
readers are going to be overwhelmed. But um, I come from a theater background.
Oh, I love that.
And there's this saying that if your character cries on stage, your audience will not. And so it's that holding back of tears, that those generating, just like getting you to the edge of the emotion and then allowing the audience to feel it. I think about that all the time when I'm writing, and really trying to evoke those emotions without telling my reader how to feel.
Yes, that's a real balancing act. Like for all writers who are writing for any age, but I'd say in particular probably for young readers, because I don't want to give anything away about Where Only Storms Grow, and we'll get into it. But you're right. There is a moment in particular with that book where something pretty devastating happens, and it's very well executed in terms of like bringing the audience to that inevitable emotion, but letting them get there on their own, but like introducing it to them at the same time, which I also think is a quality of writing middle grade. And it's a question I have later, but I want to ask now since we're talking about it, is writing in such a way that you're not, patronizing or condescending. And a lot of that does have to do with like leading them to the emotion that they're going to feel without me telling them this is how you're supposed to feel in this moment. Like they're crying, you must cry. What relationship do you have with that? Like, is that, as you said, like too much detail might overwhelm them, that sort of thing? Like, do you feel how much editing are you doing to yourself in those moments of like, oh, I led them too far into this feeling, I need them to get there on their own?
Oh yeah, a lot of it really comes out in the rewriting. As an author, and I freely tell kids this when I do school visits, I do not like drafting. First drafts, some people love first drafts. Oh, I make terrible noises while I'm drafting. I like whine as I'm typing. I just want it to be
It's really good to hear, actually.
Yes. For me, the magic of writing is in rewriting.
Oh, I love that.
That's, I often will put in a note to myself, like, fix it in post, which is from my performance background again.
Yeah, totally.
And so fix it in post-production, which for me is editing. And that's when I can go through and say, whoa, this scene is going on way too long, or I am getting way too heavy-handed with the emotion here. When it comes to young readers, one of the things that I have found is scenes can't just be one emotion. Because rarely as humans are we ever feeling just one thing. Like early in the book, the Hal and Joanna's father makes a plan with their cousins who are leaving for California that he's going to go with them to try to find a job so he can send money home and save the farm. And as they're watching this, it's not just them sitting there feeling like, oh, I'm sad Dad is leaving.
Right.
Joanna is feeling guilty because it is because of her health that the family can't all stay together and they can't go with him. So beyond sad, she's feeling guilt. She's also feeling crazy stressed because her pet chicken is under the dining table. And if her parents find that chicken in the house again, she's going to get in big trouble. So she's trying to like get the chicken out from the table while also listening to this life-altering conversation.
Right.
So there's a lot going on in that scene.
Yeah.
And even in that devastating moment, there's this confusion, there's this sadness for the loss, and this like wonder about what they might have been in the future if things hadn't changed. So I think that for me, that's in rewriting, it's these layerings that really bring out the emotion for young readers.
Oh, totally. Yeah, layering, right. Talking about young readers and talking with your young readers as a middle grade author, you're interacting with young readers a lot. And like your book tours are going to be at schools and libraries. And I'm just curious, and you have young twins as well. And I'm just curious, like, what you're hearing from them. What are they saying about what they like to read right now?
I mean, the kids, whenever I ask them what they like to read, I inevitably hear Wings of Fire, I hear Dogman,
Of course.
I think that, it depends on what audience I'm at. They read at such wide levels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I talk to kids who are like, oh, I'm reading, I don't even know, like adult books, who are in
Totally.
fifth grade. I'm like, okay. And then there's their the kid sitting next to them is still loving Captain Underpants,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay.
Totally.
And but I hear a lot of fantasy. Kids love
Mm-hmm.
fantasy. I loved fantasy as a kid,
Yeah.
so I get it.
Yeah.
But it's really fun because I think, like, with this book, I did some early school visits,
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
and I did for World Read Aloud Day. I let some of the kids be the first in the world to hear the first
Oh, I'm
chapter,
remembering
which
this
was
from
so
our
much
chat.
fun.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I got some of them just like geeking out over
Oh.
dust storms and soil erosion
No
with me,
way.
like to the point one of the teachers had to be like, okay, guys, I'm sorry, we have to cut this off. But I think that if you can capture their imaginations, you can get kids into a lot of
Oh,
different
for
things,
sure.
even soil erosion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because as adults, we kind of like need to remind ourselves to read widely because it's easier for us
Mm-hmm.
to just like go into the direction of what we know we're interested in. But as your kid, you're right. I read anything. Like,
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't have a
yeah,
favorite genre. I just read what sounded interesting to me at the time.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
whatever there was the assigned reading, and then
Yes.
sometimes you read something that was the antithesis just to like change it up.
Yes, totally. Exactly. Yeah. All the time. And I remember when I worked at a children's publisher, I accompanied one of our author illustrators to a few of her school visits. And one of the students came up to her during the signing after she did like a live sketch of one of her characters. And she was very young. And she said something along the lines of how, like, I really want to be an artist when I grow up. And I could feel the moment of being like, Aaron, the author illustrator, like made that seem very possible to her in that moment. And Aaron
Mm-hmm.
said, like, just reminded her, like, you absolutely can. And the little girl gave her like a massive hug, and I
Oh.
was so emotional. Because I was when I'm at work, I'm very like ready to work, and
Mm-hmm.
it made me. I had to walk away. I was crying so hard, and because it just felt
Oh.
like those movie magic moments that don't actually happen, but like it did. And it
Yeah.
reminded me how much those author visits really impacted me when I was young. And I remember, as I mentioned, Margaret Pearson Haddix was huge for me. It was announced she was coming to our school, and she was doing like a full assembly for all the middle schoolers, but you could write an essay to be selected to chat with her in a smaller group if you wanted.
Oh, fun.
And
Uh-huh.
I was like, well, I'm definitely doing that. And
Yeah.
I wrote an essay. My friend and I wrote an essay, and we both were selected. And I don't know, I was maybe 12, but I remember it now as an adult. It feels like a turning point for me because it made like the act of writing feel very possible. Because here was this
Yeah.
person standing in front of me, answering my questions about the books that she wrote that are some of my favorite books, which is sort of a long-winded
Yeah.
way of asking you, like, with regards to maintaining a young reader's attention, how much of that do you think is the writer's job, and how much of that do you think is like the community's job? Like, what, from your point of view, what are schools doing to encourage like a curiosity in reading and writing?
Ooh, that's a lot. First of all, I'm really glad that you had that experience. That
Yeah,
is life changing that you
it
were able to
was.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah. For me, I never met authors growing up.
really.
They were all like old and dead,
Sure.
and they felt as fictional to me as their books
That's
did.
very true, though. Authors can feel
So,
that way even
yeah.
alive. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even really, even though I loved reading and I
Hmm.
read like all the time as an adult,
Yeah.
I can still remember the exact square of pavement that
Mm.
I was standing
Oof,
on when my husband said, "You should write a book."
that gives me
Because it
chills.
had never even occurred to me that that was
Hmm.
something that people did,
Hmm.
even despite the fact that I read so much.
Hmm.
So I think that encouraging writing as a living, breathing thing
Yes.
is the best thing that we can do for kids,
Hmm.
because when they have to
Mm.
write stories and essays, there often feels like, why do we have to do
Totally.
this? But then you realize how many people make a living doing that, and how the importance of communication, like being able to express your ideas in a coherent, well written form is so important, not just shooting off a text.
Totally.
Uh, Yeah.
Poorly written.
Yeah, a poorly written text. And so, I, as an author, I only get the
Mm-hmm.
tiniest peek into schools. And,
Sure.
I love when I get to do book signings and stuff, when I get to chat with the reading specialists about what they're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. They want to ask me questions, and here I am quizzing them about their jobs and their
Of
schools.
course. Yeah.
But I love that. I love those glimpses. And I think that right now, from the librarian conferences and the teaching
Mm-hmm.
workshops I've gone to, there are some incredibly passionate educators
Totally.
out there working. And I admire them so much because they're all working so hard to keep kids'
Mm-hmm.
attention.
Yeah. You're. It's interesting you say that because I think a lot of I I think about this a lot. How like the art of writing is also like um an inherent like skill we are taught in school, and
Mm-hmm.
the disconnect is that we forget to teach kids when to break writing rules, because fiction is like we break rules all the time, and that's the jewel. It's so much fun. Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
think because you're right, like when you sit down as a kid and you have to write an essay, you have to write a book report or something, it feels like this doesn't feel like how much fun I had reading it always. um and I do remember like that aha moment of being like, oh, I'm allowed to do whatever I want when I write a story. Like, that's crazy.
Yes, but I
Yeah.
do think you need to know the
A hundred
rules to
percent. Oh
be
yeah,
able to
to be
break
able to
them.
break them. Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So I had an amazing 10th grade English teacher, Mr.
Me too.
O'Hara. And he taught us his rules for style.
Hmm.
And sometimes I will break one in my books, and I still think back, and I will literally say as I'm typing, "I'm sorry, Mr. O'Hara, I'm starting a sentence with but."
But it's delightful, you know.
But I can.
Yeah.
Um, so no, and he was such an influence. He had us diagramming sentences long after diagramming sentences had gone
Oh,
out of
fun. Yes,
fashion.
totally.
But I feel like I became a better writer because I understood the language I was using.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I had a great sophomore English teacher as well. She actually was the one who taught us A Separate Piece, and it was a huge for me talking about that book because she was like the
I
first
think I did.
teacher.
I think I did separate piece with Mr.
Yeah.
O'Hara as well. So
Oh,
yeah, that's
wonderful.
that's a pivotal year. That sophomore
I
year,
think
I feel
so.
like.
And
Mm-hmm.
she was the first to like, if you haven't read, listener, I'm sure you have, but A Separate Piece, like the male friendship in that is so. I mean, I had never read anything like it at that point, and
Yeah.
she, and this was, I mean, early 2000s, like I would say bravely made us question like, do these two boys love each other? Like, what's going on
Mm-hmm.
there? And it was like, it felt like the first safe space to be like, oh, like, yeah, maybe they do. I don't know.
Maybe, but
Yeah,
they
and
also maybe don't like each other at
at all.
all. And there's that
Yes,
layer, and it's the branch.
I know. Oh, I'm
No
gonna read that again this
spoilers,
year.
but oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yes.
So we've
But
kind of
yeah.
been talking around where only storms grow, and you are
Hmm.
featured in our September October 2025 issue of the Writers Digest magazine in our For All Ages column. And I loved this book, and I was just wondering if you wanted to tell our readers a little bit about what it's about.
Sure, thank you so much. And I'm so honored to have been chosen for that. So, yeah, Where Only Storms Grow, I say it's kind of like the I Survive series meets The
Mm,
War That Saved My Life with a
hmm.
little bit of these classic books we've been talking about, because I
Right.
definitely sprinkled in some Jacob Have I Loved
Hmm.
and the twin relationship there. So it's centered around 1935, the Oklahoma Panhandle, and the Great Depression, and Hal and Joanna Stanton are two twins who used to be close but have grown apart, especially after Joanna was diagnosed with scoliosis. Now, as the farm is falling into ruin, as the drought and the Great Depression continue on, and their father is left for work in California, Joanna winds up working for a local Red Cross hospital while Hal is forced to leave school, which is his safe, happy place. But he discovers hope in a stubborn horse and a borrowed
Mm.
book. But as the worst storm of the decade bears down on their family farm, they have to put aside the differences that have grown between them and work together to save everyone and everything they love from the dust.
Yeah, it feels like a classic book that I would have read in middle school or elementary school, because I'm also remembering I love the farm element of your book, and I love all the animals in it. I love animals, and Shiloh was also a huge book for me when I was in
Yes, I
middle
love
school or
that.
elementary school. Broke my heart. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I when we chatted for the magazine, you talking about like your process of writing this and becoming interested in your subject matter kind of by accident was really, really fun to hear. If you don't mind telling our listeners about that as well.
Absolutely. So I did not know much about the Dust Bowl. I never intended to write about the Dust Bowl. So during the pandemic, I was researching online about how to find like the most effective
Of
masks, and I
course, as we all
somehow
were.
stumbled, yeah,
Yeah.
as we all were. You know, some people were baking bread, and here I was researching masks and reading about the Dust Bowl. But yeah, so I stumbled across this article about the other time in history when Americans were told to wear masks. And I was like, oh, yeah, Spanish flu. I've been hearing about
Of
that a lot
course.
lately. But I clicked on it anyway. And I was shocked that it was actually the Dust Bowl. And that was the time, you know, Spanish flu and the mask technology wasn't great yet. They weren't
Sure.
super effective. But the masks were really effective during the Dust Bowl to keep out the dust and this
Yeah.
silicosis and the lungs that was known as dust pneumonia that was killing people. And, you know, it's the same thing as, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it's the same disease that miners get, like black lung
Oh,
that
of
you've heard about.
course.
But people in the Dust Bowl region got it from breathing the air.
Yeah.
So terrifying, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was reading about these dust storms that were miles high, and there was one in 1934 that dropped 12 tons of dirt on Chicago, continued off out to DC, darkened the skies over the U.S. Capitol, and then dropped dirt on ships' decks 300 miles off in the Atlantic Ocean. So my mind was blown. I knew
Yeah.
nothing about this. Um, so there's this old adage for writers, write what you know. But for
Mm.
me, it's always write what you want to know more about.
Mm.
And I just started doing this deep dive. At first, not even intending to write about it, just because I wanted to know more about the Dust Bowl and fill in this gap for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then somehow, in the magical way that stories do, it merged with this idea that I'd been trying to figure out about a girl who has scoliosis. And that became this book.
Yeah. Is it, what was your, did you always intend to write it with twins at the center?
No. So originally I was calling it Joanna at the End of the World or something like that. I don't even remember the exact title. And it was going to just be her story.
Mm.
And I wrote a couple chapters of it. And then I kept feeling like something was missing. And she had a twin brother in the story.
Sure.
And then I was writing a chapter and I realized that the voice that it was coming out in was not Joanna. In fact, the person was watching Joanna, and I realized it was Hal, her brother.
Wow.
He showed up and took over and surprised me, and now I can't imagine the story without him.
Yeah. I love him, and I love his love of poetry. It's so sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a special kid.
Yeah. Their older brother's 20, 18,
Yeah, he's like 1920.
19. Yeah. And I think that adds to like the level of like, there's a real sense of like maturity in the book and sort of like growing up really quickly that I was really,
Mm-hmm.
really obsessed with as a kid, because I just liked the idea of like being like a grown up or older, or like not like,
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? And there's a real sense of that in the book of like being taken seriously as a kid.
Yep. And I think
Yeah.
there's the characters both love it in some ways,
Hmm.
and they also struggle with it because they
Totally.
are still kids.
Yes.
And yeah.
Well, in our chat for the magazine, we talked a lot about connecting with young readers, and particularly with this book, connecting young readers to history, which is obviously something you're interested in, historical fiction, but also with this book, helping them understand it within the context of like their lives today. And I think connecting to readers of this age is a major aspect of getting them curious about books and reading and
Mm-hmm.
writing in general. And as you said, like write about what you want to know more of. And I think that can have like a sort of domino effect, because then, as you said, like you weren't bored, I'm assuming weren't bored writing it because you were so fascinated by it generally, that like
Mm-hmm.
it reads that way of like, I'm learning something. And I think we talked about this when we chatted, but I think as we were talking about it, there was some new news report coming out that there was another like dust storm coming for
Oh
Chicago.
yeah, I think you and I had just talked, we
Yes.
talked the same week that a dust storm shut down O'Hare Airport.
Yeah, in 2025,
In
and this book is like
2025.
a
Yeah.
century before that. And I'm
Yeah.
just wondering, like, or I guess, so you've done a few visits or school chats and stuff. Like, what is that connection readers are having with it? Like, are they like feeling the history of it, or are they putting it to their own lives?
I think, it was back in February. So, and most of the questions I got were the typical author visit, like, when did you decide to become an author? How much money do you make?
Sure.
How old are you? The things that kids love to ask. But I'm really excited to see what kids connect to.
Yeah.
I was with this book, I had the really fun experience that I got some young beta readers that are the age of the characters.
Fun.
And I gave them each a list of questions to answer. And then I had them give me their feedback. And so their feedback really did make changes in the book.
Okay,
and
great.
I'm excited for them to read it and to see what they think. One of the young boys who read it was really interested in how the cars could have kept running with that much dirt. And he was really interested in how they got around and the logistics. And I realized that was really fascinating to him. How did your daily life operate? And then one of the girls was really interested in the relationships between the characters. And she really, as a young reader, you mentioned the older brother, there's a fun little romance going on between him and the kid's teacher, and she loved that. Like, maybe it was her first experience with a little bit of romance in the book. Totally. Even though it's incredibly chaste, and Joanna and Hal most of the time are completely horrified that this is happening, that their teacher and their brother like each other. She loved that relationship, and she thought that was so fun. So I think, there's these moments of humanity and realistic things that kids are connecting to, even as they're absorbing these facts about the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny you mentioning, I forgot about Joanna Howe's reaction to her brother's romance. To your point, is like their range of emotion in the book, because kids experience so many emotions a day, that like those were really delightfully fun and funny to read aspects of the book. Of like, my younger sibling would be mortified, if I had one, would be mortified by my, like, if I liked someone, while also this like very serious thing is happening, because it does, you have to remember, like, they are kids.
And I try to keep things fun, like, even as I'm throwing historical details about, like, Herbert Hoover and, like, what he did to bring, he's introduced by the fact that there's a picture of him in the classroom and there's a spitball stuck to his forehead, and he's forever then referenced as spitball-faced Hoover. So I try to keep things fun for kids, even as they're learning stuff.
Well, and also, like, I think middle grade can really, and I think this is if writers are interested in writing middle grade, can be very expansive, in the sense of, like, it makes their worlds huge, because I forget, I was talking to an agent recently, and they were saying, like, they want more, they're curious about manuscripts that aren't stories based in New York, LA, Chicago, like these huge big cities that we all have heard of. And it got me thinking about the middle grade books I've read, and they are they take place all over the country, like, and it's like, because those kids are all over the country, and it really makes the world feel huge. I'm just curious about your experience with that, like, if you have anything to add to, I mean, there's no real question there, but, like, have you felt that way? Do you feel sort of?
I definitely am getting, as I've been talking, in promoting the book, I've been calling bookstores around the country and talking to librarians. And, like, when I was at the Texas Library Association conference earlier this year, it was really fascinating, because so many of them were like, why did you choose to write about this area of the country? And I said, because I have an immense respect for the people that live there, and I am fascinated by the stories and what they lived through. And a woman came up and she said, thank you for writing about this, because my dad lived through the Dust Bowl on the Oklahoma Panhandle, and I've never seen his story told like this. So that was an incredible moment.
Yes, and you can't predict, like, could have imagined
No,
someone would come up to you and say
no,
that.
I couldn't imagine that. And she asked, and she said, how do they handle it? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, he always thought it was his fault that the farm was failing. That will sit with me to the end of my days, that thought. So yeah,
Wow.
I think that telling people's story, yes, it's a dream of many kids to grow up and move to New York, but not everyone's going to do that. And I think that writing these stories that kids can access from all over is so much fun.
I know. Anytime I read a story that takes place, I live in Cincinnati, and every single time I read something that takes place in Ohio, I'm like, I feel like a proud parent. And like even like the new Superman movie, I don't know anything about superheroes. The Hall of Justice, it was filmed at our museum center because it's an old it's a terminal, and it just was, and so it's like very historical looking, and we'd heard that they were doing it, but when we saw it, it's very unchanged. Like it is our museum center, and it was so cool to see, and I just felt like so like proud. And it, and it can like, I think it is important for kids to be like, oh, where I'm from is not something to be like ashamed of, and I can't change it, so why should I?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as we're closing this out, do you have any like final thoughts for writers writing for young readers, writers who are curious about writing for young readers?
I think the best advice I can offer writers is, you're going to hear a lot of people say to read, but what you should really do is reread. Once you've read something for a story and you've fallen in love with it, go back and read it again. And, I hate the word dissect, but that's what you're going to have to do, to go through and find out how the author made you care. Read just the dialogue on a page to see how the conversation connects. One of my favorite exercises that my 6th grade teacher had us do. So if you're a young reader who wants to write listening to this, go through the book and pull out all the sentences and write them down one after the other that tell you about the character, how they react to something, how they look, and just look for character sentences. And then read those back to back and see how it puts together the whole opinion, and write down the page number and see how spaced out they are too.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah, I think reading a book and looking at the different elements. I love I read a book and then I listen to the audiobook so that I experience it differently.
Wow.
And I love picking apart author sentences and just seeing how they get me into it.
Well, Alyssa Colman, without any, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for joining me today and Writer's Digest. If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Sure. My website, alyssacolman.com. Again, no E. And I'm on social media, moderately active. Will probably be less so after the book comes out. But I'm mostly on Instagram at Alyssa B. Colman.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Writer's Digest Presents. Visit us online at writersdigest.com and make sure to follow us on social media at Writer's Digest for daily updates on articles, online courses, live events, and more. See you next time.